Hello friends! I figured I'd do something different today because there is no way in hell that I'm going to be able to get my embellishing my Regency chemise video up in time. So I've decided upon a Q&A. So without much further ado, let's get started. Thank you for the questions, guys. Really appreciate it. Because I got like 8 questions, which is about 7 more than I had anticipated. So the question that Claire the Loon, Green Martha, and Hello Lovely Blossom asked me is, what's your dream project? Do you have a dream project? And what's your absolute dream project? And it's a really good question because it's something I hadn't actually thought about. Strange as it is, because I know everybody has like a, yes, this is my dream project. It's no, I didn't have that response at all. I had to think about it, and after giving it some thought, I think that my dream project would be to visit a museum where they have a Callot Soeurs gown, preferably from the 1920s, of course, although I would settle for 1910s as well, because I don't know if you've heard of Callot Soeurs, but it's a fashion house that was active in the I think turn of the century till about 1930s, 1940s. And it was, as the name would imply, a couple of sisters whose parents were lace makers, and they just made the most exquisite dresses. It's so incredibly intensely beautiful. And well, to even see one in a museum up and maybe even watch the insides, touch it, look at the techniques they use, that would be a dream in itself. But I would like to take all those insights and then create my own Callot Soeurs like dress. I wouldn't want to replicate one exactly, because I think I would get too frustrated with that when I can't really find the exact sort of lace that I would need or the exact sort of beads or whatever. That would frustrate the hell out of me. I don't think I'd be able to do that. So what I would want to do is to create a gown in this style of the Callot Soeurs. But I don't want to do that if I don't have more knowledge about how they did it. So perhaps when this whole pandemic thing is over, I can search out some museums in Holland where they might have a Callot Soeurs dress in the collection, and maybe even see if I can make an appointment to go and look at it in person and touch it. I'm basically just fangirl over it, because come on, Callot Soeurs. The famous French fashion designer Madeleine Vionnet worked for them, and she was quoted as saying, "It is because I worked for the Callot Soeurs house that I was able to create Rolls Royce instead of normal cars," or something like that. My memory fails me, as it often does. Anyway, that would be my dream project. And another dream project, one that I actually want to do reasonably soon, is recreate a Gunne Sax gown. I love Gunne Sax, and I love the way that they were history bounding before history bounding was a thing. It's marvelous. The 1970s does the Renaissance. It's just everything one could dream of. So that's coming soon, hopefully. Green Martha asks, what made you fall down the rabbit hole of sewing, and what's your favorite sewing task? Well, let me answer that first one first. Again, a good question to make me think. At first, I was gonna settle for saying something like,
"Oh, it's always been like a sort of magical thing to me to make your own clothes."
Because that's the truth. But then it hit me. I actually know where it started, and I have the reason in my possession. Or actually, my son has it in his possession, because it's a children's book. It's called The Wortelkinderen, which means as much as the root children, because that's where they live, amongst the roots of the trees. And they sleep for the winter, and then just before spring they wake up and they start sewing a whole new outfit for themselves. And I remember just being so enchanted with this idea. I mean, they make the cutest little dresses, and they even have like a 1920s bob, and it sort of looks like 1920s children's clothing, so maybe that's even where my love for the 1920s started. My great aunt had this book, and it was my favorite. I would always go back to it. It's all in rhyme. It's a little old lady that takes care of them, and then she wakes them up. She says, come on, it's time, and they'll start making their own clothes and embroidering and cutting the fabric and sewing, and then they come and show them to the little old lady, and she's like, oh, that's nice. Oh, I like this. The boys have to clean the bugs. For once, the girls are not tasked with cleaning. No, they get the important stuff of making the clothes, and then the boys are like, what will the boys do? Ah, just clean the bugs, I guess. Give them a new layer of paint so they look their best. And then they go outside and they're all carrying flowers, and they dance with the insects and they say hello to all the trees and stuff, and oh, it's just so adorable. And then the fall comes, and all through summer they're outside and having fun, and then the fall comes and then they hurry back home, and then they go to sleep again until next spring. And that's where it all started. I'm pretty sure that's where it started. It's just... Thank you for that question, Green Martha, because it was a really nice trip down memory lane. I wouldn't have thought of it if you hadn't asked me, so thank you. And the second question was, what's your favorite sewing task? Well, that is actually a hard question, because immediately a lot of stuff popped into my mind which weren't actually sewing things, like embroidery and knitting, but I guess my favorite sewing task would actually be drawing thread out of linen, because it's sort of like a game to me, and I enjoy it very much. See how far I can get before the thread snaps. And possibly felling. I love felling as well. And really anything that calls for hand sewing with really tiny stitches, because it's such a test to me for my patience to not, like start off with dainty tiny stitches and then make slightly larger stitches, because it is taking a long time, and then even larger stitches and larger, and then before you know it you'll be like, I'm done, but it's ugly. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer as far as answers go, but there you have it. Hello Lovely Blossom asks, how many works in progress is too many? Well, that's an interesting question, because there's not a set answer to that for me. It all depends on how much space I have available. See, if the works in progress begin to overflow that space, then that's a sign that there's too many. Currently, I was thinking, how many works in progress do I actually have right now, including knitting? And I came down to about 10, a couple of whom are stuff that are really tucked away in a corner somewhere where I wouldn't even know where to find it if I went looking for it. So, let me show you. That's not all works in progress though, but I mean that's just a humongous pile of stash and patterns and other such necessities. But yeah, I am slowly running out of space, so I guess I'm gonna have to crack down on my stash pile and make some more stuff, thus creating more works in progress. But that's okay, because then sort of like the space that's there for the stash gets traded in sort of for work in progress space, if you know what I mean. So there's still like a humongous pile of junk, but it's works in progress and not stash anymore. Am I making sense? I hope so. Anyway, hope that answers your question. Fanny Fadenfro. Oh. Hi. Fanny Vadenfro asks, your favorite fabric to work with? Any fabric that is not insanely slippery is my favorite fabric to work with. No, seriously, I think probably wool and maybe even linen. I mean, linen is just such a pleasure to hand sew, and wool is a pleasure to machine sew. So yeah, I guess wool and linen. Definitely not silk, or like I said before, anything slippery, because honestly that's the bane of my existence. I just can't make them work in the way that they are supposed to work. So if you have any tips on making those slippery fabrics behave, love to hear them. If you've seen my American Duchess cape making video, you see that at some point I have the cape and the lining together. And then if you look at the hem, there's like, I don't know, 30 centimeters difference. Like the lining hangs 30 centimeters lower than the wool. I still don't know how that happened. I honestly don't know how that could have possibly happened. And it's sort of that what's the word? I'm looking for the
incalculable.
That's not the word that I would have thought of. Anyways, oh, hang on. It's wayward. That's it. Wayward and erratic. And I do not deal with those things well in life. So, no. Give me a good old linen or pile of wool any day. I'm a happy camper. Designed by Desiree, or also known as Desiree Primrose. She has a YouTube channel. Green Martha does too, by the way. You should check them out. Asks, oh, what would your dream historical adequate outfit be to wear on stage? Now, some of you might know I am a folk singer in my daily life. It's sort of like my day job, or it was before the whole pandemic hit. So I love me some folksy outfits to wear on stage. Like vintage stuff from the 70s is awesome for folk singers, I think. So the Gunne Sax dress would be perfect for stage wear. However, I do plan on wearing my reform dress on a stage when festivals and stuff start up again, and hopefully I'll be invited to come and play at a few of them. I think my reform dress would be a very, very good stage outfit. It's flowy, it's folksy, it's got this hippie quality about it, I don't know. So there you go, a reform dress would be awesome. Retro Claude, who also has a YouTube channel, asks, if you had to choose, would you rather only knit, only sew, or only embroider? Tough one. But I think I would have to go with only sew. With sewing, you can just make absolutely anything. I mean, you could sew a scarf. You could sew mittens, you could sew a glove. There's things you traditionally would knit. But if you were to make, for instance, an entire Victorian outfit, you couldn't well knit it. Not if you want to be anywhere vaguely, historically adequate, accurate, you know. Not to say that that's not possible for many of the underlayers, because you should definitely check out Engineering Knits, who has done a tremendous thing where she has knit all the underlayers for her Victorian outfit, but you know, the top part, like the actual jacket and skirt, she still had to sew those. So yeah, I wouldn't want to give up sewing. Wouldn't want to give up knitting either, or embroidering, but if I had to, I would give those up in favor of sewing. So thank you for asking me these questions. Thank you for tuning in, even though it's not directly sewing content. I will hopefully have new sewing content coming up. Perhaps this is a nice opportunity for me to give you a kind of little sneak peek into the videos I'm working on. One, there is the promised follow-up to my Regency chemise video, which is embellishing the chemise, which is what I'm doing right now. I currently have the sleeves embroidered with an actual Regency pattern. It's very nice, I love it. And I am now looking at knitting or maybe crocheting trim for the edges, but it's kind of difficult to get something that's actually vaguely accurate. So we might venture into the Bridgerton realm concerning the chemise, in the sense that it's historical fantasy and not actually anywhere near historical accuracy. But more on that in the actual video. As mentioned earlier, I have plans on making a Gunne Sax gown. I mentioned earlier that I get frustrated if I can't find the proper materials. Well, for this dress I have managed to sort of dig up stuff resembling the original, so it's a go, I guess. I'm working on the pattern, which is almost done, so hopefully that'll be somewhere in spring. There's going to be another bathing suit video, and perhaps some other Costubers might be joining me on that endeavor. Maybe you would like to join me. More on that later. And I am going to make some hats out of Niklas Hoppe's book. Hi, Editing Gwen here. Just wanting to point out that that is not in fact true. The book is written by Niklas Hoppe and Sebastian Hoofs, who is a tailor. Now, to be fair, I do mention this about 30 seconds later in the video, but I thought it was important to just get this out of the way immediately, because if I was in Sebastian's place and I'd written such an amazing book and put so much effort into it, and some dits would then forget to introduce me as co-author, I would just completely lose my shit. So there you have it. Sorry, Sebastian. Please don't hate me. Please don't. He is also known as Vintage Bursche. He has a YouTube channel, and you should definitely check it out if you are into the 1920s and looking for 1920s menswear. And he has a book out with his tailor friend Sebastian Hoofs, and it's oh, I just want to make everything in it. And he has very kindly given me a copy of the English version in trade for me making a video about making some of it. Now, I really just want to make everything in it, but I have decided to make my husband a hat and my son, and then I have bought 2 patterns for 1920s women and little girls hats. So I am going to do a video where I basically just make 1920s hats for all the family. It's going to be great fun. And then there is something that's also coming very, very soon that I'm very excited about, and I really can't tell you anything about that other than that it's going to be colorful and fun and something you can perhaps join me on. And I hear little footsteps, so I think my daughter has come home, which means I have to stop now. Thank you guys for joining me. See you next time. I hope to have a new video out really soon. And until then, happy sewing!